Excellent. We're going to call this policy committee meeting for December 19th open and begin with the policy committee calendar updates.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm just waiting for my computer to finish booting up here. I am AJ Bolito de Luna. I am the board executive. Sorry, can you hear me? Yeah, that's great. Joe, can I ask you to just increase that just a little bit so it's easier to read? Thank you. Appreciate it. Excuse me? I gave my complete name.
Can you move that microphone a little closer to you?
Is
Green
that-
button, sir.
Is that, yes, thank you. This will be the last time I ever have to do this, but I will miss it, that's for sure. That's true, that is true. So because anytime there is significant changes to the calendar, we want to make sure that we bring it to the committee or to the committees wherever there's significant changes. And there were a couple of changes. We wanted to make sure that we brought this forward so that the public is aware and also so that the committee has an opportunity to weigh in as well. You'll see that we now have a total of 4 policies that were on the schedule between, October and, between September and the end of this year that had to have been postponed. So I wanted an opportunity to come before you. These postponements have nothing to do with people just not doing the work. It's a matter of when we get into it, when we get into the work, there's a realization that, boy, there's a lot more work to do, and they just aren't ready to come to the board. So you'll see that in September, the student records, it's a conversion of Board Rule 505. That one was moved to October, and then you did see it, and then BEA and BEEG, that one was postponed, and we're ready to go forward with that today. But then we have the charter lease policy that we have no date. We have the conversion of Board Rule 403, which was the salary and salary schedule. We have the postponement with no date of social media, and the postponement with no date of the equity policy. So that seemed fairly significant, and especially with me leaving, I felt it was important to make sure that we brought that before the board. I will tell you that we believe that GBCA, the one that was supposed to be done today on salaries and salary schedule, we believe that that may be ready for the board in January, but we are not ready to put it on the calendar today simply because of the amount of work that is left over and what's taking place right now. But we hope that maybe we can make a last-minute add to that. The social media policy, it was just bigger. When we got into it, when staff got into it, it was just bigger. So they just need more time. And we're hoping that that policy, as well as the student records policy will be two of the policies that the board will consider prior to, or when the schedule comes forward for the next schedule in July, that if they don't get filled in before then, that those are the first 2 that will be considered for the board, for the committee to be looking at. And then that takes us to the equity policy. As you know, I wanted to inform the board that I did make a request we are a member of the Council of Great City Schools. Council of Great City Schools does research on behalf of entities. I had brought this one up when I went to the conference, and they said that yes, they would do this for me to put it in writing. I sent it to them, not for them to create a policy, but for them to pull all the policies that are out there around the state and statements, equity statements as well, from all over the country. I've said that to individuals, but I've never said that publicly. The problem with that, of course, is that we don't know when they're going to return that, but the lift is really heavy in an office of 4 people for me to get this done, especially we've only been an office of 3 people, to actually sit down and do the research on your own when there's someone that we're already paying money to that will do this for us. So I've left this up to them. I did expect that we would have a reply sometime either December or January, and that's why it's been on that agenda for February, but I don't think that's going to happen based on the last reply that I received from them. So that doesn't have a date right now either. And I should state that we are not really looking at bringing forward an equity policy. We're looking forward to have a policy on policies, or we have a policy on policies, and we are looking at bringing a policy, an equity statement that would go in there. That's what we're trying to do. But I realize that there's a lot of work to be done before any final recommendation will come to the board, and you should know that I'm going to continue to work on this on behalf of the board until we have something done. So that's it on the calendar, and I'll take any questions that you might have.
Commissioner Cano?
So thanks for that update, especially on the equity statement and gathering best practice. Is there anything we can do to encourage the Council of Great City Schools? They've committed to doing something. We're a member organization. They should pull this together for us. Can the board help in doing it in a way that's more timely?
I think if you look at the work that the Council of Great City Schools does for their members, they are very, very complete when they do something. If you've looked at any of these reports that they do, they don't just go out and look for stuff. They go out and look for stuff and write a report. They tell you what the best practices are around the country. I mean, they really put forward a lot of effort. So I'm sure, I mean, they ask us for information all the time. I pass them off to Allison. I mean, they are very detailed in their requests, and until they get a good representative sample from the council members, they don't really give you a response until then. I really don't think that we are at the point that we need to ask somebody for assistance. I don't think we're at that point.
But at least they should give us a timeline, like to say, hey, we're going to get you a draft by X amount of time. I mean, that's good and fair. We're basing a calendar. We're a member organization. I'm just wondering, can they give us a timeline?
I'll ask them for a timeline, but I would say that based on the work that they do, I don't think we need a push yet from the board or the CEO on this. I really don't. I think if we look at the work that they supply, it's worth the wait. It really is.
So thank you very much. One of the things that I think this shift actually gives us the opportunity to do is, as the district moves to more restorative practices on a school-by-school level, as we move to more shared governance, transparency with the community, moving the equity policy actually gives us the opportunity to get community input prior to even a rough draft of a statement. So I would like to formally request the board chair and board vice chair to consider adding a equity policy forum to the board calendar for sometime late spring, early summer, so that we can get folks in to share, not after the fact, but as a preliminary front loading, as a professional development for the board and staff, what are best practices, what's the sort of the thought partners' approach to an equity statement, to ensure that it does have best practices language and things like that from people that are in it. That also gives us the opportunity to inform the social studies content leads, to let social studies teachers know and civics teachers know that we're going to have this conversation, to extend an extra invitation to high school students, junior high students, to join us and share their thoughts and reflections. And given the fact that we're also moving the social media policy, and that might be something that students are very interested and engaged with, give us a chance to hear from them as well on that. So if we could put forth that formal request to the board chair, I'd appreciate it.
I just want to add to that. It looks at the calendar. You have March hold for possible board forum. You already have the date aligned there. You could just do it on that date. There's no reason why you couldn't do it on March at 6 o'clock on the calendar.
Correct, during the March meeting.
Yeah.
Exactly. I just wanted to, it has to go through the board chair, because she
No, but I'm
approves the
saying,
board
not even March
calendar.
meeting, but have a forum in March, not a
Correct.
regular, yeah.
Yep. Yeah, the date's there and ready to use.
Can I just answer to that before, is that okay? So I'm glad you brought that up, Commissioner High-Covered. The school enrollment board forum, because the work on that started late, didn't start late, it's just getting going now. We're not ready for that, so that's why that did open up. So that is a hold date that is on the calendar. And Commissioner James Hassan is right. The board chair controls the main board calendar initially, so I will bring that forward to her as a recommendation for that if there's unanimity between the members. And I just want to say this because you brought that up. The School Police Policy Forum is on January 17th. Previous editions of this calendar said January 16th. The problem with the date was that we didn't hold that date. It was my fault. I didn't hold that date on the big calendar. And then one of those dates ended up being Fair Student Funding Date. So because there was more than a month out when I realized that, I went ahead and changed the date to one additional date so we didn't conflict with the Fair Student Funding date. So that was my error in posting. But I think it's a good reason. It's enough time for people to respond for that.
Commissioner McCarthy?
And I just want to ask the committee, actually, I don't think this is a recommendation of one person on the committee. I think this should be a committee recommendation that we want to have the board form. Are the committee members in agreement to that? Because it doesn't seem to me that it's one person asking for it.
I have questions about that.
Well, and so what I hear Commissioner Hassan saying is that we are talking about a board forum for folks to give us feedback on what they'd like to see us do around equity as a district. Plain and simple. You're not presenting a policy for them to respond to. You are simply giving the public forum to specifically talk about equity things that they are concerned about, issues with what they'd like to see in a policy, and the conversation is guided in that direction. All comments that evening would be guided in that way.
With the full disclaimer that certainly not everything presented can be expected to
Yeah.
appear, much like we modeled the legislative platform this year, where we didn't come to the community with, this is our platform. We went to the community with what is important to you, what do you want to see on our platform? And they may or may not see those things reflected on the actual platform, but we knew it before we started drafting. So it's not a go back and wordsmith or correct, but it's a front loading of the community really does matter in a really authentic way. Other questions?
Yeah, no, so I just want to, I'm just trying to understand it more because at the same, two things is, it was helpful to talk about the legislative platform around that, to just get broad input on what we want on the legislative platform or broad input on equity. But I think we have to be clear on what we're going to actually be developing so we don't raise false expectations. So I worry about there's so many people have so many different opinions about equity, what that means, what that looks like. I just would want to make sure that we're clear so we manage expectations appropriately. Because what we're talking about, I believe, is a policy on policies, a board statement about how that encompasses everything that we do and how we should be thinking about the work. And I worry about not by opening a gate and then there be advocacy for other things that, would not be where the board or the CEO wants to go.
Right, and that's why we would use that as an information gathering session, certainly not to take every little piece, but to hear what the community wants, not as an approval, but as a crafting.
Yeah, I would just add that you could present a couple options that we could think about, not a policy in front of people, but to say, we're thinking about adding this to our policy creation piece where it says every policy has to have an equity lens. We could also create a separate equity policy. When we dealt with the policy around sexual harassment and it turned into a transgender issue that was not being represented in there, the issues that they were bringing up, most of them had nothing to do with harassment, but rather were around equity. And it just seems to me that I agree, but we should have a policy creation policy eventually. That's my 2 cents. But there needs to be an examination of whether or not an equity policy needs to exist based on what the public feedback was. I would never have thought that way had it not been for those students sitting here and telling me, it's not about me getting harassed sexually at school. It's about me using which bathroom I can use or whatever. And that's not a harassment situation. That's an equity conversation. So, and that's one small example of a larger issue that needs to be thought through really carefully. I think the public can highlight things for us that might need to be included in equity policy that wouldn't be covered in a policy creation policy. It's a simple, and you could do both and, right, or neither one. And I think it's what we hear from the public, and the board says, okay, with that feedback back, and now we're going to do X, Y, and Z. I think it's fine.
What does it do for a timeline? I mean, I thought, because originally we talked about hearing something in February, now we have
Right.
no, I know, so this would delay it even
Right.
further.
So the other advantage to doing this, one is that it is postponed in February. So this also lets the community know that we have postponed, it doesn't have a date, but we haven't forgotten, and we are moving forward. It also provides a start place for staff who are working on that policy, where right now it's, where do we start on this 9-headed hydra? And how do we move forward to make sure that whether it's a statement to policy, a policy, however it ends up fleshing out, that it is both nimble enough to cover everything so that we don't have to continually revise for the one-off changes as language around identity changes, as language and information understanding around historical oppression factors change, so that it can be all-encompassing. So when something does come up, like the transgender conversation, it's not oh crap, we missed that. It's about making sure that we have a foundation to stand on that says every student will be respected and their needs will be supported in city schools.
So I appreciate this conversation a lot, and I appreciate this perspective. I'm in a different place. I actually think it would make more sense for us to get our best thinking down of what this looks like for our kids, actually get it there and have a full and robust community engagement process. I worry that in my conversations, people use language completely different. It can become unwieldy, and then we could be going down rabbit holes. So I don't think you start with this one with a forum. I think we have a plan that we actually research it. We bring our best thinking to bear, and then we have a full engaged community process.
Yeah, I would just say that they're not necessarily our kids. They're the community's kids. And so we may not be the best arbiters of what equity needs are. And so getting the community, and very clear to the community that this is not, you're not writing the policy or the statement right now. What you are is providing input on what you think needs to be present, what you think can be omitted, and to get a wide swath of that input prior to the beginning of crafting.
And I would agree with both of you. I mean, I think that there have to be clear, we have to be very clear about our intent, and that the forum isn't, we're not asking the community to come give us an equity policy. That's our work to do. But we want to listen to them before we start. We want to hear their ideas so that when we start, we're fully informed rather than coming up with something ourselves and then having them react to it. This gives us a chance to listen to them and hear their ideas before we start. So I think that makes sense.
I'd like to just add to that. I agree. I think one of the biggest concern, our greatest concern, when we have forums and we invite the community, one of the things that always come up is the fact that many times they say they hadn't heard something, they didn't know anything about it. Why are you talking? They're not familiar with the terminology. So many things they're not familiar with. And I always believe that we should move forward with allowing the community to have some input just to say that they were at the table. And then we can take the information that we collect and we can move forward with that information, but it will allow people to feel that they are part of whatever's going on, the issue or concern, and they participated. And then we take the information that we collect and move forward with it.
I could not agree more with you, Michelle. Every policy we've asked staff, who have you consulted in bringing this forward to us? And there's always a slide now about who they've talked to first. The board is saying this is so important to us that rather than staff having to go out and do this on their own, we're going to participate in that conversation. We're going to hear back what needs to be in the policy as well before we start thinking about it. I think it's that important. I think we've been dragging our feet on equity, and it's an important enough issue. We just need to take it on head and go for it. So I respectfully disagree with you, Peter. I think it's really important that we hear from the community first. They'll feel engaged. They'll feel like they've had an opportunity, and then we'll put what we can put in it, and we'll be realistic about it, and we'll come back and talk about it. But at the end of the day, at least we've been informed about what the concerns are or have been.
I mean, the only thing I would say is in the 2 years I've been on the policy committee, we've done a really great job of establishing parameters and doing a very robust community engagement process on policies that we can go through across the board, that it's not just a couple people giving, we can talk about the discipline policy, we can talk about all the things that we've done, and so we've put that in place as the way that we do it, and I think it's not short thrift, it's very robust. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm one person. What?
We're not doing it. Staff is doing that. What I'm
Right,
saying here
I'm doing it.
is if you're doing, board's not having a conversation with community about it, that's what I'm saying. This is, to me, so important that it elevates to the different level of having the board have a public forum about it. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I don't
I don't think
necessarily
it's
agree.
different. I think you do both, but I think it's important enough that we should hear it directly because it informs how we think.
Can I just add one to
Commissioner
it? My opinion is, we're putting this all together. We all in the same, we're all saying the same thing. We're just allowing the community to have more input. And I learned a lot when we went out to the community and we went to the schools to hear their opinion about different things. We during the summer when we were doing door knocking and all of that. And we found that what we think is different than what they think, because, and what they hear, what they hear as well, because life is different for some people, and we aren't out there in the community. And I think that we should move in both directions, but we need to make sure we're here for the community and the kids. We're here for the community, so we have to listen to what they have to say and hear their opinions, their ideas, and many times they come up with information that we have not heard before. So then we can move in the direction that you're talking about, Peter. But I think the first step is always allow the community to have input. That's what we are, the community.
Well, we're not, I hope we're not saying, we have I mean, if we did that for all of our policies, so now we've given a different gradation to this, which Commissioner Highcupboard believes is the case, and she's making a statement, which I appreciate, but we will not be doing that across the board for all these policies, but just with the, just equity. I'm just saying.
However, so we're talking about equity. We need, every policy have a procedure, and everything, all the policies work in different ways. But when we talk about equity, we want to hear everybody's voice, because it is so widespread, there's so many pieces and branches to it that we need to hear. Because you just mentioned something about sexual harassment, what came to the table when the young lady brought up another topic, and we had to address that issue. So we have to hear, not for all policies.
I was just reacting to something you said. That's fine.
Oh, okay.
I get it. It takes in your mind, it takes a special place in the hierarchy because it's that important. You want to make that a statement prior to formulating policy, have
Just
a form.
like the police policy.
Right.
We had a form about that before the same thing. To me, it's just an elevated thing. I appreciate, and I'm not questioning what staff has done to do community engagement. We ask those questions to make sure that it's been done and whatever, and I appreciate that. It just, we're putting a spotlight on it, makes it a little bit more important, that's all.
We want to get it right, and oftentimes the other piece is staff engages with organizations. So this gives Joe on the street a chance to share that may not be a part of any other formalized organizations. The other piece is we actually do have, with the public comment policy, a place for future seeing, someone can easily look and say, oh, in June they're doing product endorsement. I want to come and talk about that in March or April or May. So that place is there. But as Commissioner High covered, this is just setting it a little bit later in the evening, a little bit more accessible, with a little bit more announcement around it to hopefully get a wider swath of input. So, general,
So I would
I'm
just
sorry,
take-
I have to
take a
interrupt.
vote.
It sounded like you're about ready to get a general feel of the committee. The problem is that there are 5 of you, that's a quorum of the board.
so we can
So if you get a general feel of the committee, it is the action of the board.
I just get a general feel of Peter?
And you certainly can, however, I understand the direction is for me to now go to the board chair, bring this calendar issue or question to the board chair, and, which is her right to add forums or not add forums. You could always appeal to her, to the chair at any time if the chair decides not to have a forum, but the decision is hers by right of title. So I'm going to ask you not, I think I heard you. I think I heard you well. I think I know what the direction is, and I'm looking at the chief of staff, and I believe she understands it as well. And we'll have further discussions with the chair, and if we need to bring it back to committee, we will. But if you vote on it, it's a done deal for the board.
But, and when you bring it to the chair, and we have our chief of staff sitting here, you explain, and I'm sure you do, you explain all the details about the conversation that we've had and why we feel the way we feel.
No, I will, and Commissioner Canham is the vice chair, I would have that,
Oh,
we have a weekly meeting,
right.
and he's very good about bringing forward any statements of other board members, and he doesn't cloud it with his own, he's
Even though he
very
disagrees,
good.
just saying
No, he's very good, and if he doesn't
He
think,
has equity
I
in his
disagree on that.
presentation.
I do have a
But
full
you guys got
voice.
4, I got 1.
He's got
I-
equity in his presentation.
I do have a full voice in those meetings, so I think that I think you'll be well represented with the chair, and we'll go from there.
And I
Sounds
trust Commissioner Cannon as well, so.
Yeah, no, I will.
All right, any other questions on calendar changes, shifts?
Thank
All right,
you.
thank you, AJ. Are you presenting anything else today?
I am, but I don't know what, I wasn't next on the agenda, and I don't know what people's schedules are, so I don't
Okay,
want
well,
to.
then I won't formally, officially thank you for your service yet. I think we'll move on now to grant fiscal reporting. Is that Mary Ann?
Yeah, we did.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon. I'm Mary Ann Cox. I'm the Deputy Chief Financial Officer. I'm going to be presenting the proposed grant fiscal reporting policy. Now, will I click through? Let's see. Oops. Oh, okay. This grant fiscal reporting policy will be replacing Board Rules 909.01 and 909.02. The purpose of the grant fiscal reporting policy is to provide guidelines for the fiscal reporting requirements pertaining to grants. Just as a background for grants, the FY18 budget for grants is $97.3 million, and the food service, which is essentially a large federal grant, is $48.6 million. So grant funding provides supplemental resources for the educational and operational programs of city schools, so we're always very grateful and are more than willing to comply with any requirements relating to our grants. Now, one thing that will come back into, wrong way. We will once again reinstate the semi-annual grant reports that will come to the board. It's been a number of years since we presented those semi-annual reports, but they essentially will be a listing of all the grants we have, all active grants, the amount of the grant award, the expenditures, the encumbrances, and the remaining balances. And we'll give other information like when the grant expires and items like that so that you have a feel for our grant funding and where we are in the expenditures of it. This particular proposed policy was just signed off by legal on the 13th of this month. So now that legal has signed off on it, I can send it to the community, and it's been proposed that I send it to PCAB and the Charter School Advisory Board for their feedback. And if there are other parties that the board would suggest I send it to, I'd be happy to do so. Okay. In terms of grant acceptance, the CEO may accept grants on behalf of the board. Just a little aside here, for grants that we get from MSDE, we also sign grant assurances, and the CEO signs that. And that's where the CEO agrees to comply with the terms and conditions of the grants, and it's a lot of far-reaching things. We comply with IDEA rules, we'll use fund accounting for reporting, we'll comply with federal standards, those types of conditions. In terms of the actual reporting policies, this is only fiscal reporting. This is not programmatic, only fiscal. So in the overall grant world, there's a lot of programmatic and fiscal and sometimes consolidated reporting that we do. In terms of programmatic reporting, the grant manager is responsible for that. In terms of fiscal, I'm sorry, I keep forgetting to do that. See, am I on the right one? Oops, went the wrong way. Okay, I want 8. This one. Okay, the grant manager is responsible for complying with the programmatic reporting requirements. The chief financial officer is responsible for satisfying the fiscal reporting requirements. Sometimes they're independent, such as for the single audit and the CFA that's included within the single audit. And sometimes we provide the fiscal reports and we give them to the grant manager for inclusion in their submissions.
So these various reporting processes and submissions shall be in compliance with the related state and local laws, COMAR, and federal, and any other reporting requirements that are related to the grant. Audits. Oh, I did that again, wrong way. Audits. All grant activity is subject to audit. We are audited a lot. I'd be happy to provide a list of all the audits we go with. But certainly, the grant reporting has special audit responsibilities. Right now, we are engaged in the single audit. That is due per COMAR to MSDE no later than 12/31. So we're in the final phase of that. That is an audit that reviews all of our federal grants, regardless of the fund. So that's basically it. The real changes for this, of course, is going to replace the board rules, and we are going to once again reinstate those semi-annual reports to the board. Will have good information on the status of our grants at 2 points in time during the year. So are there any questions?
Commissioner Badneva?
No, I actually don't have a question, I have a comment, because I was just reading, this is general practice for any grants for the state, local, and so I'm just happy that you put that there, because this is what everybody follows.
Yes,
So
that's
I
right.
didn't see anything new or different than any other grant that we write.
No, actually, most of our grants are federal. We have a
Right.
few state, but most of them are federal, so there's a very strict audit standard for
Right,
all
I mean,
those.
this is this standard for
It
everything. that you
is,
do.
it
Okay,
truly is.
Right.
Commissioner Canna?
Do we have to put in policy, or does it stated somewhere around how much we can kind of take off the top for our administration, our administrative services? Do we just say followed by, what the local, state, there is a perception that when we get a grant, I guess my question is, do we have a certain percentage or recommended amount that goes out to programs, basically, rather than administration?
Well-
And how do we detail and determine that? Because we
Yes.
get it,
What are our indirect costs?
yeah, what are our
The-
indirect
the
costs? We
indirect
get
costs,
feedback.
yes.
We get feedback that, is it going to the, everything's going to North Avenue and the project's not getting done. So
Oh.
I know. I just want to kind of say on the policy, like, where does that reflected?
Certainly, we can add something there about the indirect costs if you like. The MSDE has an agreement with the feds in terms of what the state of Maryland's indirect costs may and may not include. And then we, as LEAs in the state of Maryland, must comply with whatever agreement MSDE has with the feds. So it's based on costs from 2 years ago. There are some costs that are excluded, some that are included, but the indirect costs, both restricted and unrestricted, are submitted to MSD for their approval, and then they approve them, and then we may apply them. And it's a very formal process.
So where can we outline that? Where is it appropriate in the policy to outline?
Well, it's not in here now, but we can certainly add something
I
just
think
to
that's
call it
important.
out.
I think it's
Certainly.
important as we're out there trying to fundraise for the blueprint locally and nationally and other places that people understand that. I think that's great.
Oh, I just want to add, but it's different for all the grants. So when you do MSDE, you have one
Well, we can
policy.
say there's different ones. Some grants do not allow an indirect
Right,
cost.
because it's all according to what, well, you know this, you do grants.
Yes,
Yeah, so it's all according to what grant you're working with.
that's right. For the feds,
grant, I'm sorry.
right now, our current rate is 2.70%.
And that's
So
for MSDE.
yes, that's for the federal grants that
All
we
the
have.
federal grants?
Title I, most of them. There's
Oh,
a
okay.
few, the small grants, we typically cannot apply an indirect cost, but they're really
But
small.
like in National Science Foundation and DOE, Department of Energy, all those, is that the same?
If they're, are they going to pass through? There are some grants that we get directly, and there's some that most we get through MSDE. Most of the ones that we get through MSDE does have that 2.70%.
Okay,
The state grants have a ceiling of 2%.
right.
And some of the other grants don't allow any at all. So, it all depends on the terms of the grant.
What does MHEC allow?
If we get it through MSDE, it would be
Like
the
if you're doing a gear up, what
2.70.
does that allow?
Yeah, I'd have to look if it's.
Oh, that's okay.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Highcover?
So this probably isn't actually for you, but it's more for the board and board exec. We do a pitiful job of reporting on grants that have been given to the district at board meetings publicly. We do a random $5,000 gift here, a $2,000 gift here. Based on what I'm hearing now, we have a clear list of what's happening. We need to do a better job, I think, in our board meetings of publicly thanking the people who give us money. And I don't understand why we're elevating a $2,000 grant when we have a $2 million grant from somebody or whatever. And given the blueprint and what's happening and the push to raise money, we need to be better stewards of the money we're getting. And I've asked for it before. It hasn't been able to sort of come to fruition. But my last sort of swan song, if we could, let's do a better job of thanking these people so we get more money. I mean, it just, we're in desperate need for it. And we need to really sort of put it in the board minutes, and we need to say it out loud in a more robust way and be appreciative.
That's a good flag. We should be doing that. And we just got grants for, like you said, to support the blueprint. We haven't acknowledged them here, so we should be doing that.
Can I join in with that?
Sure, go ahead.
I totally agree, and I think that it backs all the way back to 1 year ago when I came here, and the first thing my conversation was about grants. And it's very difficult to be out there trying to find grants for Baltimore City when we already have grants here and you don't know anything about it. And you're out there pushing for grants from different organizations and find out that, we already received money for this group of people, or we haven't. We need to know, and we need to toot our own horns, because like you just said, with $2,000, when we're getting $1 million grants, and we should publicize what we're receiving, because the public just doesn't know,
So, and I think this highlights a need that we have that I'd love to see in the budget as we move forward. This is all accountable from the CFO's designee, but a development office. How long would it take to develop a development office before it pays for itself? And to be able to really, especially with federal grants, because the compliance is so strict and so punitive if you fail to meet a marker, that it really could support our long-term fiscal sustainability. Mike.
Okay, I'm going to stop beating this up, because I've said from the day I walked in, one of the things I wanted to offer or ask questions about, where is the development office? Have we ever met the person that you talk about that writes it? We don't have it.
We used to have one with
I know,
budget cuts being
I found it
eliminated.
out. We should have a development office, and even if we have someone you said that writes the grant, it would be good to meet the person who writes these grants, because we, as a board, we have a lot to offer, and I'm concerned that I talked about this and I don't hear any more about it at all. I really would like to have that conversation, and I think it's critical, because it's about funding and programs, and we should be on top. Everybody wants to be a part of Baltimore City Public School, because where else are they going to get such wonderful kids if they don't get them for Baltimore City Public Schools? And I think that we need to, it's critical when you go out and ask people about funding, and you want to say, we want you to partner with us, or where can we go to talk to your development person? That is absolutely critical, and I hope I don't have to sound this way a year from now. I'd like to see us resolve this or have a conversation about it, because I think I talked about it so many times. I'm sure everybody was kind of sick of hearing it, but it's money, so it's opportunity.
Thank you.
So-
Commissioner Hubbard?
I'm just going to add to that, Michelle. I've been saying it for quite some time also, and the public pushes back on us all the time about sort of central office expenses and budget and whatnot. And I think an honest conversation we're having right now is that this is a perfect example of why central office actually needs money also. Our schools need the money, and there's no question about that, but they think every drop of dollars that come back to the district needs to go to schools, and yet we don't have anybody here to actually raise money. So folks who are supposed to be doing other jobs, i.e. curriculum or managing charters or whatever they're doing, can't do that because they're writing grants for their departments. And so I agree with you 100%, but I think the public needs to hear that in an open way from us to say, we don't have anybody here to actually write grants and be able to manage them effectively. I don't mean manage them financially, but I mean like the reporting out and what happens to them. And it's a lot of work to do that. It's very cumbersome. And nonprofits all have a grant manager, but a district that has $1 billion budget makes no sense. And so there's got to be a give and take about what the central office is down to bare bones. And I don't even know how they do their jobs that they're actually doing now with the staff that they have. And so, maybe we need to be a little bit more forceful about that in our budget conversations about, look, You call somebody, you don't get a call back. It's not because we don't want to call you. It's because we don't have enough staff to do it. Same with the grant stuff. I just think we would be honest about it and think through in the next budget cycle how we staff the central office appropriately.
So specifically to the policy, a couple of pieces. One, in the semi-annual report, I think it's important to also show the unfunded grants. So not just the grants we've received, but how many we've applied for.
And
as-
did not receive, is that what you mean?
Right, as a way to show the capacity, because it is a workload issue. And it shows the ambition and the robustness and where we're trying to find funding. So I think that's an important piece. Under Roman numeral 3 in the actual policy, letter C, which is the grant application process, there's a couple things that I think are missing from there that we might want to reconsider.
Okay.
And one is, what about independent funders, or who can apply for a grant? So if I read this as a teacher in a kindergarten classroom at school A, it doesn't say anything about I can't go ahead and apply for an NSF grant. But how are we communicating so we're making sure that we're not digging in deep buckets too often and that we're not leaving money on the table? So something in the grant application process about who can, or who do you contact if you find a grant you're interested in? And what's the threshold limit? So if you're applying as a teacher for a $500 grant from a local department store in your community, do they need to come and get approval? If it's a $5,000 grant, do they need to come and get approval? Or if it's a $50,000, like, what's our threshold for you have to communicate with someone in your curriculum stream or your administrative stream that you're pursuing this? Because I know there's a lot of entrepreneurial teachers out there that are going to their local Target or Walmart and saying, I need $100 to do this. So,
And many times when they get such funding, they run it through their school activity fund and will expend it there. But if they want to do anything that has a purchase order, then they have to run it through our books. And the dollar amounts, you're right,
Right.
are
and
critical.
that just doesn't seem, and it may be in the regulations deeper, but I didn't see it here. So I wanted to flag those piece. And then as far as stakeholder engagement, I'm not sure who we're missing, but it feels like we have a lot of partners, especially in the philanthropic sort of co-granting that might be interested in providing matching funds or things along those lines that might really want to weigh in on this. And I don't know if that's through Baltimore's Promise or if there's another ABAG. Yeah, ABAG. So getting some of those we typically think about them as funders, but they very much may want to weigh in on this as co-participants as well.
Okay.
Commissioner Cannon?
I was thinking another organization, the Fund for Educational Excellence, helps us raise money, so they would probably have some thoughts on how this should be structured too.
Now, this is about fiscal reporting. This isn't about, grant applications and such, except in a tangential way. So, I'd be happy to reach out to them, but, the reporting requirements are what they are. Sometimes the grantors require reporting, reports, and sometimes they don't. But we can certainly ask, and with the mind that there's another side to this, isn't there? It's the programmatic part that we will get to, and it's just not included in this one.
Okay, so then I would simply say then under Roman numeral 3, letter C, which is the grant application process, a asterisk to also see policy A, B, C,
Whenever.
D, 1, 2, 3,
Okay.
so that it's right there. So if I am a teacher and I go, I don't know if I can apply for this grant, let me go to the board policies, I see it's not there,
Okay.
then I don't know where to reference next.
Okay. we
Anything
can
else
do
on this one? Thank you very
Okay,
much.
thank you.
I appreciate that. We are moving on then to policy BEA and BEGB, board meetings and agendas. And this has been a long time coming, and a flexible board in piloting something new based on our prior board chair's initiative to increase transparency for the board.
All right. Hi, board members. I'm AJ Luna. I'm the board executive, and hopefully this will be fairly quick. This one's been dancing around for some time now. So I wanted to remind you about how we got here. And this really came from the chair and the vice chair asking for greater transparency. When I first came on board 2.5 years ago, that's when the committee meetings moved downstairs and more public. And then there was a request to also try to make things more public, and I think that was from the board in general, where they wanted to do less upstairs and more downstairs out in the public. Even if the public isn't here, they could view it online, they could see the streaming, or they could go back and review it later on when it's posted on board docs. So the initial policy was presented to PCAB over a year ago on November 3rd. It then came here to Policy Committee, and then we had the public comment period. You might remember we had this long survey that we posted. We got a lot of responses to it. And then there was a second presentation to PCAB based on the feedback that we received on the surveys. And Leah Amelga was the one that was doing really the bulk of all this work on this. We then went to first reader back in January, and then we had a public work session where the board really engaged in a long discussion about public engagement and how the public has an opportunity to speak, when they have an opportunity to speak. There was a lot of things that you wanted us to incorporate, but as a board, you had agreed at the public board meeting on February 28, 2017, to pilot a new agenda for us. And there was actually 4 things that we ended up trying. And we did it. We put it together, we met with staff, and we started the pilot in July, and we tweaked it based on what was happening at the meetings and what the board was trying to achieve. And we come to the end. We had our last public board meeting on December 12th. So now it's time to decide whether or not we want to make this permanent. So I just want to remind you that back in February 28th, we were moving 2 items from the executive agenda to the public agenda. We wanted to change the meeting start time so that we could get more information done downstairs and still be available to the public. We were going to adjust the public comment sign-up, and I'll have more on that on the next slide in a minute. And then we were going to amend the public meeting agenda to accommodate the public comment. Let me go to this slide here. This slide will make a lot more sense. So the prior practice that we had on committee reports was that it was done upstairs during board executive session, during the board's executive session upstairs. And of course, board executive session is closed to the public. So we decided that that's one of the items that we wanted to bring downstairs, where the committee reports will be done down here. And I think that was really successful, having that done downstairs instead. I think that without a hitch. And I think we all realized once we started doing it, and once the board started doing it, that we should have been doing that all along because it was that easy to do. The consent agenda used to be done upstairs, and that's another item that came downstairs. So all of the questions are asked in public. All of the answers are in public. Nothing's done behind the doors, so to speak. And I think the public really liked that. And that's being done before the public speaks. There's a review of the consent agenda so that they hear the questions of the board. Also, as we all know, but maybe the public in general doesn't know, but several people in the public email the board, they text the board during a board meeting or just before a board meeting, and that gives the board members an opportunity to ask those questions. And then the public has an opportunity, based on what the board just discussed, to discuss it themselves during the public comment period for the folks that signed up to speak. So that was brought downstairs, and I think that's also been really successful. That part has been really successful. We had recommended that, our prior practice was to have the public meeting would start at 6:00 p.m., and we requested that we start at 5:00 p.m. in order to accommodate the additional items downstairs, but also so that the public wasn't sitting around for that many hours before the board would end up voting on items. And I also think that has worked out. There have been a couple of meetings where it's been really close because we make sure that the public comment period does not begin until 6 p.m., and we've been really close on a couple of those, but we hit it every time. We haven't started public comment before 6 p.m., and I think that the way that we have the meeting aligned right now, it works, And we also have a backup plan if we need to, where the board does have the right to move any item in any meeting up in order to make sure that the public comment period doesn't start too soon. The prior practice was that the public comment sign-up period would begin at 4:30 in the afternoon and go until 5:45. There was a recommendation that we would change that, and that the public comment period would end at 5 o'clock, or 5:15, forgive me, and we didn't do it. We wanted to try it because the board had asked us to try to extend that as long as we could, so we did. And it worked out, because since the public comment period doesn't begin until 6, we have runners now who are basically, I mean, I'm not saying it's easy, but we have runners that are running the sheet up and down, and then we'll get two sheets if it's delayed, but we've been on time every time with the sheets to the board chair in time by 6 o'clock. A lot of effort by a lot of people. So that was the prior practice and the recommended changes, and that's what we did. I don't know if you're coming to me or, oh. Right. So it's our recommendation that that we go ahead and solidify these. It's our recommendation that you go ahead and solidify what we piloted into policy, and that we also ask that based on, since you've already been doing this for 6 months, we're asking that at the January 9th public meeting that you go ahead and vote on this policy, and that you waive the 2-reader policy and just make this a board policy effective immediately on January 9th.
So prior to going to questions, something for you to think about, Mr. Luna, is we have permission from the chair to go ahead, since we have 5 of us, and make a motion to waive the reader policy and vote on it here, and just be finished with it.
That is the board's prerogative. I would say that there are 4 board members missing at this meeting.
Correct. They're weighing in.
Oh, all right,
So-
very well.
So if they get back to us, but while we do that, and
We would love that, because then we don't have to
Commissioner
worry about
Cannon,
doing this in
questions?
January.
So I'm fine with these changes that we made, but it's kind of like, is this it? I've always thought, again, having people come in person to sign up in this day and age is just burdensome. And I just don't understand why we can't figure out a way that people, in a very equitable way with technology, can sign up online and don't have to wait for an hour and a half. So I'm okay with this, saying, making sure that this is kind of like the foundation and that we can build upon. But I just wanted to say, does that exclude us in any way of doing that?
It does not exclude you, and I will say to the entire board that this is something that we are actively working on. It isn't going away. It isn't part of this policy
Right.
anyway. But once there's 2 parts, right? You might remember that Tammy Turner, the chief legal officer, had some concerns about some of the ideas that the board had, and she should be getting back to us soon, I think, on some of those concerns and addressing them. They were doing some research, and they were going to write a legal memo on it. And then the other part is simply making sure that our we have to have the technological way of doing it, and people are actively working on this. So this isn't over. Some of those other comments are still open, and we're still working on them.
Can I just,
great flag, Commissioner Cannon. Commissioner
can
Brogan.
I just join in and agree with you, Commissioner Cannon? I want to join in. I think it's so antiquated.
Beat 'em
It's
up, build 'em
so- It is so behind times that we would have people come over here in the snow, rain, sleet, and hail to come over here just to sign up. When we teach, encourage technology, we're putting all this technology in the schools, in the libraries. People who do not have a computer will find a way to get that. If they found a way to get over here by whatever kind of transportation, they likely can find a way to get to a computer. I think that it makes us really look not so good to have people come over to speak. So whatever discussions you're having, I think that we need to move it along quickly.
Yes, ma'am. I will say that just last week, I fielded a question that came to the board office, a parent complaining about her 3 children being required to use the internet for homework because a certain percentage of the students that go to that particular school do not have access to the internet. So we are trying to be sensitive to that, trying to figure out a way of how to allot certain numbers and make sure that we have an other way for people to do it, like calling the office, opening up a window, and then calling the office, and the first 3 people that call versus the first 7 that sign up online. So we're being very, very thoughtful about this, but again, we're waiting on the technology to catch up. Just because the technology is out there doesn't mean that we have it. So it's about just waiting for the technology, for us to catch up to that part of the technology, and we will implement it. But we're also going to be sensitive to the people that do not have access to the internet.
Commissioner
I
Highcover?
want to say that the parent who has 3 children with not having access to the internet will probably not be the person who get on the bus to come over, okay, or have someone to come, I'm not sure, but I'm thinking that I've had a conversation with people who have problems dragging their children over here to speak. If they can do that, they will find the library or somewhere before they get to this location.
We will find a way.
Okay, thank you so much.
Commissioner Highcover?
I'm just going to respectfully disagree with my 2 commissioners next to me, and thank you for providing different access. I do think we can do this with technology, but I also think a phone call line or something is absolutely critical. We just have too many people that don't have, the phone service goes out, whatever might happen. I just don't think it's equitable to say there's one way to do it. So you could provide an online forum. You could also then plaster the board phone number up or whatever you need to do. There has to be a way that's beyond the computer for folks to sign up. So, to my 2
Commissioner
cents.
Cannon?
Just to
should see that soon,
clarify,
by the way. You
I
should
I
see
was,
that soon.
I wasn't saying that's the one way to do it. I was saying it should be an option of multiple. So that's it.
Yeah, fair enough.
Thanks.
All right, so given that the board chair is in favor of us moving this forward, that the prior board chair, who is also not here, won't be here in January, and proposed this, we could go on an assumption that he would agree, which means there's only 2 other members. So does anyone want to put forth a motion to waive the reader process and vote to accept board policies BEA and BEGB as written? Well, then say it into the microphone, Mama.
of that. You moved to accept.
You need to be on,
Okay, I will make a motion to put, okay,
just so moved.
so
Works.
moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor of waiving the 3-reader process and approving policies BEA and BEGB? Raise your hands. Commissioner Berkeley, Commissioner Bondima, Commissioner Canham, Commissioner Highcover, and James Hassan. Motion passes 5-0.
Can I just ask so that we have a public statement about this at the board meeting so folks are very clear, not just in committee report, but that it's written and that we did this already so folks know, if we can.
I'm sorry, can you say that just
So
one more time?
on the next board meeting calendar, or I'm sorry, agenda, that's stated on there versus just waiting to have policy committee report to say we did this. I want to make sure folks know that action was taken.
Yes, ma'am, we'll add
Thank
something.
you.
Yeah, that's okay. Next policy committee meeting is January 16th. We'll be talking about the use of technology and graduation requirements. So that'll be a fun one. Formally, I would like to thank Board Executive. Oh, is there something else, Tanisha?
I think there's a request that we re-announce the police forum.
Oh.
On the new police policies, revised and new police policies. The forum will be on January 17th. That's a Wednesday in this room at 6:00 p.m.
6 p.m. And there will be, as a forum, that's all public comment, correct?
It's all public comment. So there should be, Mr. Joe Strayek, who's the board liaison, has been working really hard on this for over a year now. I'm sure he'll be the person giving the presentation. So there'll be a brief presentation, maybe not so brief, but there'll be a presentation, and then it's all public comment from there. And he's been working, he's been working with dozens and dozens of organizations, so. I
And
think the
because
board
this
will be
is an
really pleased.
800 or million-page document,
Yeah.
do we have a tentative when it's going to be on Board Docs so people can have some holiday reading?
It is on the, Joe, can I ask you if you still have it available, can you put the board the matrix up? Yeah, it's available. He's putting it up now.
Yeah, no.
Joe's magic.
Joe's great.
Joe.
I'm going to miss Joe when I leave.
You'll come up with a new imaginary friend.
He's going to miss me when I'm gone, though, I can tell you that. Joe, can you just expand that a little bit as well? Expand that one time? There you go, thank you. So if you see the school police policy is scheduled to come to the forum on January 17th. It will then come to the policy committee on February 20th. February 20th to March 20th is a public comment period. You'll see that rather than going to the very next public board meeting, we pushed that out to April 24th. We did that on purpose to give additional time for people to write comment, but also to make adjustments, since it is such a really big policy. And then the board is scheduled to vote on it on on the second reader and vote on May 22nd, 2018. And here's Mr. Strake.
Welcome.
Hi, everyone. I got a little nervous when I heard this being posted on Board Docs, so I just wanted to give kind of a overview on everything here. So the board forum is going to, right now, we're in the process of reviewing our current general orders, which haven't been updated in about 5 years. We're going over general orders from a multitude of school police, university police, county, city, state police throughout the country. So we're kind of still matching up over those 800 pages of where we align with that. So we're going to use the forum as a sounding board of what the community wants. I'm working to hear what organizations want. So there's not going to be any real updates on Board Docs in advance of the forum, but we're hoping that shortly after the forum, definitely in advance of the February 20th date, the public will see the first draft. And as AJ had said, then we're not going to the full board until April 24th, so people will have a little over 2 months to digest all of those documents. We'll be able to provide written feedback during public comment in advance of April 24th, and then we'll have another month to do outreach to capture anything else. So that's kind of where we stand with that. Yeah, thank you.
Joe, could you just, for the public's sake, what's the difference between a general order and a policy so that they're ready to understand that language?
Great question. So the general orders are the day-to-day of our school police. So it's everything from how you dress your uniform to how you use the radio transponder to, your equipment. It's your day-to-day real manual of how to do your job. Our policy is, and this is based specifically on feedback that we've gotten from the community, that's going to be more of an overarching policy on our vision of what school police should be, and that our guidance is based on Dr. Santelises, so a lot of that's going to be about community policing and, the way that our police interact with students and staff members at city schools. So the policy is kind of an umbrella policy that oversees everything, whereas the general orders are kind of the day-to-day. And as part of the policy, we're planning on having the general orders be part of regulations, because general orders change all the time based on best practices, state law, federal law. So we would like the ability to be able to update that based on the CEO's recommendation, so we don't have to go through a 3-reader process, because then we get to this point where it's 5 years and we haven't updated our general orders.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that
All right.
clarity, and I'm sure that'll come out in the forum again.
Yeah. And I am going to miss AJ. I wanted to publicly say that.
Yes, as we all are. So thank you, sir, for your service. It has been a privilege.
Well, I really enjoyed all my time here and working with each and every one of you. So thank you for the opportunity that you've given me. I really appreciate it.
So we look forward to the next policy meeting on the 16th of January, and at 4:40 p.m., this policy meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
440.